The idea that there's only two people criminally responsible is definitely not the case. This needs to go all the way to the tops of the US administration and to the European Union elites who have enabled and ensured that this genocide has continued. Israel is finished after this. They have nowhere else to go. I firmly believe that this is this generation's Vietnam. Things will never be the same. What have we come to? Green governments across Europe arming a genocide when Thatcher and Reagan imposed an arms embargo. It shows how much the world has gone in a really dangerous direction. About time, where were you for the last year and a bit? But it should have to be the start. It's only the start. The idea that there's only two people criminally responsible is definitely not the case. This needs to go all the way to the tops of the US administration and to the European Union elites who have enabled and ensured that this genocide has continued. It couldn't have happened without them. It wouldn't have even started without them, to be honest. And unless it goes there, well then, you know, the ICC has a huge credibility problem, which it had anyway. It's sort of slightly rehabilitated itself, but the fact that the ICC, which is, you know, different than the ICJ, has taken this decision shows you how even they cannot stand over what's gone on there. But it must be deepened and it must be continued more.
When you were an MEP, you were very outspoken about the onslaught of Palestine.
I've been involved in politics for 40 years, but I have never seen anything like what is being unleashed in Gaza, in full public view, while the world watches it unfold. 10 days of relentless airstrikes, 1 in 1,000 people murdered by the Israeli government in a week, open declarations of siege, 24 hours of fuel, electricity and water left, collective punishment on innocent people, all illegal, all war crimes. And when the EU should have been arguing for a ceasefire, for the upholding of international law, for the protection of civilians, Ursula von der Leyen touches down in Tel Aviv to photo op the preparation of a genocide and says Europe stands with Israel now and in the days to come. How dare she? She has no authority in foreign affairs matter. She does not speak for me. She does not speak for Ireland, and she does not speak for the citizens of Europe. We stand for peace. We stand for justice for the people of Palestine and for the upholding of international law. It's long past the time that this woman exited the stage. It's time for her to go and for the International Criminal Court
So the debate is closed.
Do you feel vindicated in any way by the decision now, or?
I think it's a horrible word to use in this context because it's just so tragic and unimaginable what humanity has allowed to continue there. It's not that it's the first genocide, but it is the first that's been openly declared and publicly carried out with full enabling by the the global north, while the rest of the world watches. And Ireland has been part of that by the spiking of the dual-use goods sales to Israel since the genocide started through allowing the overflights. I was, what's the word? I hate, you know, I was, you know, you're never happy or glad. They're the wrong words. They're not the words I'm looking for. I was honoured, or I can't think of the right word for this because it doesn't really fit, but it was my job to use that platform to highlight what was going on. I think I did it well because people from Palestine and Lebanon and all over the world have been in contact, and all over Ireland and Europe, about how they were so glad that their voice and their opinion, which is not mentioned or articulated in the European mainstream at all, even though it's the views of the majority of people in Europe and probably in the US as well, but they don't often hear it in those centres of power. So it was an amazing opportunity to use it, and I'm very glad I did, but I'm very sorry that I had to, because, you know, humanity's future is up for grabs here. It's quite clear the West has decided that Israel is the harbinger of bonfiring international law and heralding in a world where might is right all over again.
You, even before this last year of the most recent genocide, as you say, you were in Brussels, banging the drum is probably not the right way to describe it, but you have been vocal on Palestine in Brussels for years now. How did it feel to be, I suppose, coming against a brick wall almost, that you're trying to spread awareness and spread, and I mean, you only need to look at social media to see how much reception by the wider public you've gotten for your stance on this. But how did it feel to be within that space and not kind of see the reciprocity of your view?
Well, I suppose, you know, politics is a bubble. It's becoming increasingly a bubble in Ireland, whereas there's a disconnect from those in power with the people on the ground. But in Brussels, multiply that by 100. They're in a complete bubble of self-vindication where they are called, they answer the tune of corporate interests, be it the military-industrial complex, big pharma, big agri. That's who they answer to. And they obviously tell them that they're doing a great job. And within that, in terms of foreign policy, you did have a lot of Zionists in the parliament. You did have, but generally speaking, there was a huge reception across the board from the staff in the parliament. There was been incredible displays of solidarity from the staff. I mean, you know, they work in an institution. I didn't fully believe ever the EU mantra that they are a force for democracy and good and human rights for all that. You only need to look at what they do in their own countries to know that that's not true, but they peddle themselves on that. But a lot of the staff working there believe that the European Union did represent democracy and values and rule of law. And then when they saw direct complicity and green lighting of the genocide, they were horror struck. They were literally traumatised, and we had an incredible meeting, which they tried to get cancelled, with Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, which was packed to the gills with hundreds of staff across the institutions, and there was a lot of bullying. A lot of staff of Palestinian origin lost, you know, one man nearly lost 100 of his family there, and he worked in the institutions. Can you imagine working for an organisation and then hearing its leaders basically goading and continuing on that genocide? So you do it because you know you represent what's real, and that's a bubble, and they are the past. Like, this is, Israel is finished after this. They have nowhere else to go, and it may not seem like that because, you know, the EU and the US have their backs at the moment, but I firmly believe that this is this generation's Vietnam. Things will never be the same after this, and a whole layer of young people and people who are older who never paid attention to this issue are not going to let it go until there is justice for Palestine and this issue is dealt with. It's absolutely tragic that it's happening at such a terrible cost and that still it continues, but it is the harbinger of a big change as well. So you have a job to do, you have a responsibility, and anywhere I got elected, I never saw it as an end in itself. You know, people say, oh, vote for me and I'll do this. That's nonsense. I would say vote for me and I will use the platform to shine a light on issues that other people are afraid to go to because of the media or whatever. You know, a lot of people in politics, they spend their lives trying to get elected, and then when they get elected, they just want to stay there. So they don't want to offend anyone, they don't want to do anything, they walk down the middle of the road. Not interested in that. We had a job to do. We were able to use the platform to voice the real opinion of the majority of decent Europeans, Americans and people all over the world, because we look at things in a really Atlanticist way here in Ireland. Our media is really Western focused, but the majority of the world's population lives in countries who don't think like that, who have a different view. We never hear that reflected, and it doesn't mean that anyone is right and anyone is wrong, but dialogue and an exchange of views and treating people with respect, honour and difference and all of that is the only way forward. But unfortunately, the administration in the US and in the EU now is being hijacked by the military-industrial complex, which Michael T said in a recent talk is the most dangerous organisation on the planet.
Mm-hmm. How do you think the complicity that you were talking about, the complicity of Ireland, European Union, just the West in general, how do you think, well, one, how do you think it will be remembered now that it seems that there's kind of a ball rolling in justice for the Palestinian people? But also in the immediate term, what do you think the consequences for the West will be if there's any justice to be seen for the Palestinians?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in the short term, things are going to be difficult. I genuinely believe that it wouldn't have mattered which lunatic won the US elections, and that the result for the rest of the world wasn't going to be great, and certainly for Palestine, it wasn't going to be great regardless. But I do think that the American people are off their knees now and are pursuing this issue. I think in Europe as well, we've seen huge displays of solidarity. They're not going to go away. And I do think that that will only grow and accelerate. I mean, in Ireland, we've had this horrible game played by our government. I mean, I often have people, in Europe say to me, oh, the Irish are great, you're brilliant. And I'm going, well, the Irish people are great, and they're certainly totally on the side of politics, but our government hasn't been great. I mean, can you imagine? Like, here we are, a country that was occupied, where we have an affinity historically.
Some might say it still
No,
is.
it is occupied. A country occupied, and that's the thing, who have an affinity with the global south, but very much in the global north camp. We're uniquely placed to play that role. And if we had played that role, it would be a beacon everywhere else. Instead, we were coattailing. Even Spain and Belgium and Slovenia were better than Ireland. I mean, we should have been pushing for action. I mean, think about it. In 1982, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, arch pro-Israelis, imposed an arms embargo on Israel. And Micheál Martin can't call for that in a European context, or can't champion that. What have we come to? Green governments across Europe arming a genocide when Thatcher and Reagan imposed an arms embargo for something which was terrible, but far less than this. It shows how much the world has gone in a really dangerous direction. So I think that fallout is definitely something that we need to look at and will play itself out as we move forward. But there's no way around it. Like, the movement that is on the streets has to be toughened up. The BDS, the whole isolation of Israel, in the way in which ordinary people did it with South Africa, because it wasn't governments. And we talk about the Dun strike here. During the Dun strike, of course, the government of Ireland and all these new fans weren't on the side of the Dun strikers, who had to lead it themselves. But that always happens. But it was ordinary people then. It will be ordinary people now, because if it isn't, humanity is lost, and we can all pack our bags, because the world is over and international law is over, and we can't have a world like that. And I think there's so many groups, lawyers organising, doctors organising, actors organising, midwives organising. The solidarity is bottom up. We need to, spread that to BDS and serious action and blocking of Israel, and it will work.